understand segregation as the separation or the isolation of a race, class, or ethnic group enforced by the force of voluntary residence in a restricted area, by barriers to social intercourse, by separated educational facilities, or by any other means of discrimination. The process of segregation has been widely studied in literature. Park postulated the city as a mosaic in which the diversity at the metropolitan level is related with segregation. This separation will establish moral distances that will portray a set of little words that coexist spatially but do not overlap in a social dimension. Socioeconomic segregation is based on the idea that a class, a caste, or any social or economic dimension creates a gap in between those who belong to one group or the other because of their different practices due to the different access to the goods and services. The ethnic segregation instead is based on the idea of an imagined community that shares a series of cultural features as language, religion, or even a place of living or origin. This last feature entangles the ethnic segregation with the notion of the national and the foreign concept. While the first is a practical notion of social bounding, the latter is a primordialist view of a group conformation.
The first urban theorists, like Park, back in the first decades of the 20th century, delimited the study of cities to the neighborhood unit. Park stated that the cities are more than a set of individuals, buildings, streets, institutions, but a state of mind with their own social conventions, attitudes, and sentiments. A state of mind, which probably as Zimmel proclaimed its objective as where humans' interactions, lack of emotional and personal involvement of small communities, giving rise to calculated and instrumental relationship between inhabitants of a city or metropolis. If cities are units, neighborhoods are subunits, where the humans and physical interactions are organized, where the particular state of mind begins to develop, and where the primary forms of political and economic involvement in the city is generated. As Park said, neighborhoods themselves have their own particular past that imposes to the present and that grows more or less independent from the city. The study of neighborhoods as subunits grows parallel but independently by imposing the need to think about the relationship between central and periphery in terms of Lefebvre. Fishbacherberg is a residential neighborhood in the city of Siegen to become an object of study, segregation topic. Since during the last decades it has public housing and where some public-private urban development initiatives have taken place. The history of Fishbacherberg is still crucial for its military use. In the 60s and 70s, many apartments for Belgian military personnel. With the withdrawal of Belgian forces in autumn 1992, so many flats were free. In the early 19th, Fishbacherberg drew a great public attention. Long-term sustainable improvement of living and quality of life of local people was started to be considered. In other words, neighborhood planning was the first task. As Lefebvre says, with the industrialization, the term of the city planning came to the agenda. In other words, planning of a laboratory of humankind. In the Fishbacherberg case, we are also talking about a city planning, but in a micro scale, which is neighborhood planning. By the cooperation of interdepartmental project groups and City Siegen, constructing a youth center, churches, schools, playgrounds, various educational institutions, employment support and providers of social services, family health center to a neighborhood where German, Turkish and Russian German families live today became an issue.
For the development of this investigation, we conducted 3 different observations on December 18, December 28, and January 18, 2016. Prior to the fieldwork, as group, we decided to use physical space traits to investigate segregation in Fishbacherberg, under the research question, how does the physical space reflect segregation? The main conclusion of the observation period was that the physical space at Fishbacherberg showed that it is a mixed socially residential area that shows segregation in two scales. On one side, the neighborhood is separated from the city due to geographic factors and to how the city of Siegen was planned. On the other side, differentiated social groups coexist in a way. Diversity is highly marked by the type of housing as a result of public intervention projects in the area.
Fishbacherberg is about 2 kilometers away from the city center and the rest of the commercial life of the city. That makes our area of study clearly separated from Siegen by geographical and social means. In addition to this, there is a single way to access it, and just one public bus line that reaches the neighborhood. In comparison to other areas of Siegen, there is little commercial life there, which forces people that live there to move from the area to access day-to-day goods and several other services.
Socioeconomic segregation means residential segregation of population groups based on occupation and income. Even though we couldn't determine incomes of the inhabitants, we were able to observe that during the night the parking lots around the public housing were some occupied by trucks used in the farming and construction sector. Information from 2008 provided by the Statistische Bundesamt shows that the labor cost of the construction and farming sector was one of the lowest, just above the support service and good services activities. The number of trucks caught our attention since we have not seen that in other areas. In addition, we saw a difference between the use of light in old buildings and in new apartments. In the old ones, the lighter apartments were few. In the lighter ones, the light was dim and of low intensity. In contrast, in the new buildings, almost all of the apartments were lighter, and the intensity of the light was brighter. They had lighter Christmas decorations, while in the others, not. We learned later that in public houses, the use of energy is restricted to some specific bulbs per month, and that might explain why inhabitants of those are more careful in the use of electricity and use of low-consuming bulbs. In the same topic, Fishbacherberg, the lighting columns are situated in a long distance, which produces some darker spots. As we know, darker spots in the streets and deficiencies in the street lighting produces a feeling of insecurity, making possible the configuration of dangerous situations.
Fishbacherberg is a neighborhood where you can see luxury, detached houses and luxury cars in one area and feel miles away from them the apartments needed to be seriously restored. Also, if you go there, you should keep your expectations about to see restaurants, cafes, bars, grocery stores very low. Despite the existence of many playgrounds and some football grounds, public sphere was seemed unsatisfying to us. Because of the lack of existence of public spaces, we didn't see many people for analyzing the issue of segregation. However, it is clear that there is a segregation in housing, from low income to high income.
The broken window theory is a very famous criminological theory with highly effect in urbanizing theory, which states that the current appearance of buildings and public spaces is related to the probability of vandalism. In places where there is disorder, dirtiness, and especially appearance of abandonment are more likely to have criminal situations. The theory is open to discussion, and there are some supporters and many others who reject it. The issue is that in the case of Fishbacherberg, there is a structure which in the past served as supermarket of the Belgian military base, which is completely abandoned and its surroundings are poorly lighted. The abandoned structure is just few steps away from one of the public housing buildings. We don't know if there has been any criminal incidents around the new buildings, but if the theory is true, there is a problematic spot in the neighborhood which needs to be addressed. Besides, some of the structures in the residence are in a clear abandoned condition.
There is a special place we call as Germanized neighborhood, reflects Simmel's blase attitude. As we remember, blase attitude indicates that there is so much going on in a city at one time that people eventually shut down and begin to ignore everything that is happening around them in order to stay sane in their environment. Straße, which is isolated from other areas by German flags in front of the houses, fences, different types of street lights, luxury cars but no pedestrians, no parks for other people living outside from the area, was the example of a blase attitude for us. As Simmel says, metropolis creates protective organ for reacting in a rational manner, while small town rests more on feelings and emotional relations. In the Tringerstrasse case, metropolis can imaginable as Siegen, and small town as one of the areas of Fishbacherberg, which is Tringerstrasse. The people living in Germanized neighborhood seems like they have a strong emotional relations with their German neighbors, but not with people living outside from their living space.
The problem of segregation is mainly a governmental responsibility. In recent years, the private sector has been involved in the issue and worked with the state to address the problem. There are many formulas and actions that have been implemented to deal with the problem all around the world. What all these formulas have in common is the premise of equal access to public services as the first step. At the neighborhood, we were surprised to see arterial routes as well as highways covered with snow. The different members of the group live in different neighborhoods of Siegen, and all of us agreed to say that in our own neighborhoods the streets, even the small ones, were clean from the snow at the moment. Also, during the 3 visits, we noticed the garbage containers always full. Actually, in one of the visits, we saw that the containers were so full that people dropped garbage bags on the floor around the container. It gives a bad appearance, and the smell was almost unbearable. The neighborhood hosts one of the urban social development programs in the region. The public housing before mentioned is part of this program, in which governmental institutions, private companies, corporate foundations, and various social institutions such as the Evangelical Church participate. As product of the program, we can see the community garden, the neighborhood school, and several sport and recreation facilities. The number of playgrounds is impressive compared to other areas of the city. The neighborhood hosts one of the urban social development programs in the region. The public housing before mentioned is part of this program, in which governmental institutions, private companies, corporate foundations, and various social institutions such as the Evangelical Church participate. As product of the program, we can see the community garden, the neighborhood school, and several sport and recreation facilities. The number of playgrounds is impressive compared to other areas of the city.
Fishbacherberg is a peculiar neighborhood in Siegen due to the public and private intervention in the frame of the North Rhine-Westphalian social program. It reflects public efforts to provide housing to those who need it the most, but as an emergent phenomena of the private action, segregation has arisen in a discrete manner.